We are continuing our Marvel Marathon Madness with 2003 Hulk, a film about the iconic, anger-fueled, uncontrollable green monster. Directed by Ang Lee and starring Eric Bana and Jennifer Connolly, this was an ambitious project to say the least, as this was the very first attempt at a live-action Hulk film, as well as carrying a budget of $137 million. So, let's go ahead and jump straight into the plot. David Banner is a researcher focusing on genetics backed by the US government in the hopes of improving humanity. His superior, Colonel Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, forbade human testing, so David experiments on himself. His wife soon later gives birth to their son, named Bruce. David realizes that Bruce inherited his mutated DNA and tries to find a cure. Ross later finds out about the trials and shuts down David's research. In a maniacal fit of rage, David rigs the base's gamma reactor to explode as revenge. He also believes Bruce is a risk and tries to kill his own son, but accidentally kills his wife when she intervenes. Due to the trauma, Bruce represses his childhood memories. Ross then sends David to a mental hospital and places the 4-year-old Bruce into foster care. The kind Miss Krensler adopts him, and Bruce assumes the surname, growing up thinking his birth parents are dead. 30 years later, Bruce becomes a brilliant scientist employed at Berkeley Lab with his girlfriend and Ross's estranged daughter, Betty Ross. Representing Atheon, a research company, the devious Glenn Talbot learns about Bruce's nanomeds research to create regenerating soldiers for the military. David reappears as a janitor in the lab to intrude on Bruce's life. Now General, Ross investigates, becoming concerned for Betty's well-being around Bruce. Bruce then saves a co-worker from a malfunctioning gamma sphere. He then wakes up in a hospital and tells Betty he feels better than ever. But Betty cannot understand how he is alive since the nanomeds killed everything else in sight. What they are not aware of is that the emitted radiation combined with Bruce's DNA. Following that, Bruce meets David, who reveals their relationship and hints at Bruce's mutation. He later uses samples of Bruce's DNA for experiments. Bruce's increased rage from the surrounding tensions around him activates his gamma-radiated DNA, and as he becomes the Hulk, he destroys the lab. Betty finds Bruce unconscious in his home, with the latter oblivious to the previous night. Ross arrives later to interrogate Bruce before Betty locates David to investigate him. After hours of grilling, Ross seizes the lab and places Bruce under house arrest. David later calls Bruce, saying that he mutated his dogs and sicked them on Betty, which naturally angers him. Lamenting the lab's ruin, Talbot attacks Bruce, who transforms, injuring Ross's military police and Talbot. The Hulk finds Betty at her forest cabin, saves her from the dogs, and then changes back. Betty calls Ross the following day, and the army sedates and takes Bruce to Desert Base. Thinking he will turn insane like David, Ross doubts helping Bruce, but Betty persuades him to let her try. David subjects himself to the nanomeds and gamma sphere, allowing him to meld with and absorb properties of anything he touches. Talbot seizes control from Ross, forcing Betty to return home. Now he looks to profit off the Hulk's power, so he tries but fails to aggravate Bruce and places him in an isolation tank. David confronts Betty at her home, offering to surrender himself, yet also asking to speak to Bruce one last time. Talbot then triggers a nightmare from Bruce's repressed memories, which do cause a transformation. He traps Hulk in a sticky foam and tries taking a sample of him, but the Hulk breaks free. Talbot is then killed when he fires an explosive round which recoils, and Ross resumes command. The Hulk leaves the base, battles the army around it, and then leaves to San Francisco to find Betty. She convinces Ross to take her to him, so Bruce can return to normal. Bruce and David then talk at a base in the city while Ross watches, threatening to incinerate them both. David has sloped into megalomania, desiring Bruce's powers to balance his unstable molecules so he can effectively end all his enemies. Bruce naturally refuses, so David bites into a high voltage cable as Ross is powering it, absorbing the energy and thus mutating into a powerful electrical entity. Bruce turns into the Hulk and combats him, naturally overpowering him. The two are then assumed dead after Ross fires a gamma-charged bomb to end the battle. Now, a year has passed, and Ross keeps Betty under surveillance, as Hulk sightings are reported continuously. We find out Bruce is thankfully still alive and in the Amazon rainforest working as a medical camp doctor. His camp then gets overrun by soldiers that are trying to steal their supplies. After Bruce tries in vain to warn them not to make him angry, they fail, and the Hulk roars in rage as the film ends. Now, this was quite a ride of a film. The representation of repression of trauma is quite good, however, the film does seem to lose itself in the narrative and the aspect of familial drama. While many comic book films today have a grander spectacle, this one is a bit more reserved in that regard, and thus may work for some while losing others. I personally found it to be okay, but I wanted more Hulk, the real Hulk, to show on screen more often. The aspect of uncontrollable rage could have just as well been a grounding of what Bruce must deal with as the trauma was. Now, the next video I will cover is 2003 Daredevil, and following that will be 2005 Elektra. So stay tuned, and please do consider hitting the like button and subscribing. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for spending your time with me. Until our next adventure, you all stay classy.